start of it in old New York.
We do counseling with, if you like, the technical term for what we do is counseling. However, because of the type of person I reach, the target market I have, which is the high achieving male, they don't really go to counseling. Therapy is not their thing. That's not on their list of things to do. But what they have voiced is that they need to have conversations with somebody who understands them. And so we package it as if it's a conversation. So it's a series of conversations to help that high achieving, stressed out man kind of find the peace that he's looking for, because usually he has his wife and his kids and probably a business or either a job or career that he's juggling, and life has become this like meeting after meaningless meeting. He's got the money, he got the whole American dream, but he doesn't have meaning in his life, and something is missing and he feels dissatisfied. So we work with that guy to help him find a meaning in his life, to help him love his life so it becomes the American dream that he thought it would be. And usually what happens after they go through our process, then they want to stay in and stay connected. So we also have a community. So we do one-on-one, we do group, and then we have a community of people who are kind of healed. I call it healed from the American dream idea, because you know how society tells us this is like one way to be. And instead of having to follow that one way that society tells us we can be, we have a community of people doing anything they want to do, but creating a life that is meaningful to them, not what society tells them is meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's something that's common now. A lot of men in particular are trying to discover how to fill that void.
Yes.
And in some ways that expresses itself through a sports car. But what do you typically find to be, because you think that's the first thing that comes to head, is some guy older than me. That's why I wear a hat. The sports car, middle-aged. I'm not middle-aged, but I'm just saying.
And that's what happens right around somewhere between 40 and 55. A man will hit what society has called a midlife crisis. I call it an existential crisis, where he is juggling freedom and responsibility, where he is saying, where am I? Is this where I wanted to end up? Now he's starting to question all the things, and where money is just not enough. He used to put his head down and just go for the money and not care about how meaningful life was. But after a while, he started saying to himself, like, why am I doing this? Like, why is this important? And he started seeing how disconnected he was, because a lot of times when we go on this quest for success, we sacrifice our wellness, we sacrifice our relationships, we sacrifice our hobbies, and that's not a meaningful life. That's not a prosperous life. And eventually it catches up, and the money is not going to fill the voids, like you said. And what society likes to teach us is that money can't buy happiness, but it's not true. It's just that money alone can't buy happiness. You need other things to go along with that. Some of those things will be bought with money. Other things will be created.
But what is a common thing that like somebody has that's avoidance? Would it be somebody that doesn't have a family, or?
Not necessarily. Sometimes I get people in my office, they feel really lonely and they have a family. They have 2, 3 kids. They have a wife, even a husband, because I also work with women who have male dominated industries. And what that woman goes through is that she has to lose a part of herself in order to excel. And when she loses that part of herself, that creates the void. So for a man, what happens with a man is that he's following the rules. He puts his head down and he goes for that American dream. And so the guy what they have in common is that they're starting to feel like it's just not enough. And really it comes from what society calls that midlife crisis. And in the middle of your life, you want more. You want more than a title. You want more than money. And the reason why you want more is because you always did want more. it didn't happen in the midlife. It really happened in the beginning of life. And you started following all the societal programs and saying, oh, well, I better do this, better go to school. That's what everybody else is doing. Better get a job. That's what everybody else is doing. Better get married. That's what everybody else is doing. So as you start to do what everybody else is doing, you get further and further away from who you really want it to be. And that's why you go back and buy that sports car, because when you're 19, that was your idea of being an adult. You're like, when I get older, I'm going to buy me a Ferrari or whatever, right? Whatever the car is, the car of choice.
Right.
So what you're trying to do is kind of start all over by buying that fancy car. This is your way of saying, you know what, let me reset. Let me go back to my first dream, get my fancy car. Maybe I get a younger woman, whatever I need to make me feel young again and like I'm starting all over.
What would you be, I know you're well, first let me say, what's your educational background? How'd you get into the field, into this field? Because in your profile, it says #1 clinical hypnotherapist. I get that right? In the world. And
yeah, specifically specializing in financial therapy and stress management. So I also do some work in anger. So
oh, good. I'll talk to you after this.
Okay. So my bachelor's degree is in film and television. So I never dreamed that I would be a therapist. Well, that's not true. When I was 13, I thought I would be a therapist because a girl in my community committed suicide. And I just could not fathom why a 13-year-old would have that much stress on their life that they would want to end it. So I wanted to be a therapist, but then as life went on, I began to fall in love with the entertainment industry, and I ended up going to college for that. Well, years later, there's just so much fluctuation in the entertainment industry. One day you have a job, one day you don't, no matter whether you're in front of the camera or behind. And so I wanted to do something different, and I ended up going into the financial world. So I did everything that has to do with finance. So stocks, bonds, insurance, annuities, money itself, loans. I've sold it all. If it had a dollar sign associated with it, I have sold it. And so, but that got boring. I was like, okay, I don't really like creating portfolios. What I really like is hearing people's stories. And so I went back to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling because I realized that people needed help with more than just the numbers. A lot of times they could do the portfolio management on their own. Especially these days, people are getting more and more savvy about picking stocks and not choosing mutual funds or using ETFs. And so it was getting really boring and frustrating for me. So that's why I went back to school, got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And then my last class was trauma. And I thought I would hate trauma, but I ended up falling in love with it because my teacher was a hypnotherapist. And so she showed me hypnotherapy. And once I realized how profound hypnotherapy was, I immediately, right after I graduated, I went into the hypnotherapy program right after that. And so I got 100 hours of training in hypnotherapy in addition to my degree. And now, I have thousands of hours now, whether it's practicum or actual seeing clients, because that was 3 years ago. And it's the best to me. It takes talk therapy to a whole nother level. And because I work with men, doing hypnotherapy allows for men to not to have to talk about their feelings so much.
Well, why men?
Because women don't mind talking about their feelings.
No, I'm saying why how did the focus with men start?
Oh, it didn't. I never
Just
ever
naturally.
set out. Yep.
Okay.
I never set out to only work with men or specifically work with men, and it never happened. What happened was the very first client I had while I was in my private practice internship. So I did 2 internships. I did an internship in the hospital, in the psychiatric hospital, which was fascinating, and I loved it. I loved the patients, but I did not love the paperwork and the bureaucracy and all of that goes with the hospital. And so I didn't end up staying there. And I went into private practice for my internship. And the very first patient I had in private practice had what they call rage at the time. They're like, this kid has rage. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, send me the kid. And so because I was just so like calm and mild-mannered around him, where everybody else was up at arms, I was able to heal the anger and rage that he experienced and go get to the bottom of it. And so after that, in the particular area that I was in at the time was a small suburban like town in Georgia, and the word got around. So they're like, well, if she could do that for this kid, she could do that for my kid, and then my husband, so I just got known as the anger healer. And so that's how it happened.
You should talk to everybody in the world right now.
I know, right? Yeah. So that's kind of how it happened. It just happened. The universe just set it up that way. And because I noticed it was happening, then I started to really hone my program so that men could be more comfortable, because therapy is uncomfortable for men because we haven't given men the tools to have a successful therapeutic process. And anger, lust, and greed are the few emotions that men are allowed to feel. And so because of that, when they come to therapy, they can't explain to me what they're going through. They can't unpack the feelings because they haven't had access to them in all their lives. When they were little boys, people told them, oh, that person hit you, hit them back. It wasn't like, oh, disgusted, tell us how you feel. None of that. Oh, they're like, oh, he's going to be a ladies' man when he grows up. Oh, how many girlfriends do you have? Those are the questions that we ask our boys. Oh, you're going to grow up and buy your mom a house, and you're going to be big and strong and rich. This is what we teach our men: be big, strong, and rich. When they say, when you're sad, tell somebody. When you're disappointed, when I have hurt your feelings, I can't hurt a man's feelings and without him feeling anger, right? He's not going to say, oh, Kine, you hurt my feelings, and I feel shame or guilt or whatever other emotion he might feel. And better than that, he's not even allowed to feel happy or positive emotions either, because that's not manly. Oh, what's he smiling about so much? Right? It's like, what kind of guy is he? He's calm. Like my nephew, he didn't even want to smile on pictures because he thought it wasn't manly. It's like, oh my gosh.
I wish I had a picture of one of my high school IP photos, because I just look angry. Some of this stuff is hitting too close to home right now. We might take a break in the middle of this.
Yeah.
The first episode of my podcast, by the way, is called, the title is just me talking, and it's called Existential Crisis too. That's how it started. Oh, very
nice. Yeah. And you're not alone. You're not alone. If you have a lot of male listeners, I'm sure that it's hitting home for quite a few of the men that are listening. And even those who aren't listening, just because they're probably at work putting their heads down, waiting for that existential crisis to happen, right?
Yeah,
they haven't gotten there yet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, what was your main first? What defined somebody, or how was rage measured that they knew the child had rage? Well, you said he didn't have rage.
Yeah, he didn't have rage. Rage. Well, let me say it like this. He had rage to the degree of what the people around him were judging him for. So when it comes to the type of work that I do, I remove the judgment. And this is a tough place for a lot of people, especially this is what therapists have to do, but even we don't do it very well. So if a man is a rapist, I still need to see that man and help him heal for whatever got him to be a rapist. He wasn't born a rapist. He was born a sweet, innocent little boy. And then something happened along the way, and that was the path that he took. And I can't judge that man for his actions, his behavior. What I can do, though, is help him get back to who he originally was. And if I put my focus on that, then I can let go of the behavior. And so what people were doing, were putting all these titles on this young man. And because of that, it was making him worse and worse. Instead of just saying, let's talk to him and figure out what is happening, which is what I did. And the truth is, and every man listening is going to understand why this boy was enraged, if he was, because they moved him across country, his parents. And he had just gotten a girlfriend. And he had just gotten cool. And probably was just about to have sex. So you think this
poor guy.
You think this boy is not mad? He waited all his life for this moment. And they plucked him right out of his situation where he was just getting cool, just getting a girlfriend, all the
He
stuff
was
that a
just
man.
figuring out his niche,
Yeah,
whatever. That's
exactly. And just getting to the point where it's like, okay, finally, I'm going to be able to say I've had sex, which every little boy is waiting for that moment. And they took that away from him. And so he didn't know how to say, hey, I just got a girlfriend. I don't want to move, because that doesn't sound manly, right? And that's just not how a boy would talk to his mother. He just gets shut down because he wasn't given the access to those emotions to explain to his parents what he was feeling.
in some ways he might not even know on some level, like
Exactly.
that's why he's acting out the way he is. So, but what was your main method? Did you use hypnotherapy to treat him?
hmm
So,
Yeah, I use hypnotherapy. I use hypnotherapy in pretty much every single session because it helps to soften the heaviness of therapy. And so I want to say it makes it easier, but I don't want anybody to believe that it's just going to be a wave your magic wand kind of thing. It's work. You're still doing some work. It just lightens the load of the work. And what happens too is when you are in therapy, sometimes you go back and you talk about your past traumas and the stuff you've gone through, and it re-traumatizes you. And you talk about it and you talk about it. And then next
you
thing you
need
know,
therapy for your therapy.
is exactly. And it's just not, it's that that's not the only way. And so it's not that talk therapy doesn't work. It's just that for the type of person that I work with, this is the best way for them to get to healing, because they want quick results. These are high achievers. They want to get it done. They want to know the step-by-step process. It's just like, tell me what to do, doc. Let me do it. Give me the blueprint. Give me the playbook. This is the guy, the alpha guy. And the woman who has dominated male dominated industries, that's a certain type of person. They don't want to sit down for
Like
hours
the
and
A
hours and
type.
weeks and weeks and months and months and years talking about the same thing. If it doesn't have results, they're not going to do it.
So what exactly is hypnotherapy then? Is it like, you think of hypnosis, you think of a guy with a watch saying, "I'm going to put you into a trance" or something. So how exactly do you click? Do you make something switch in the brain?
Yeah. So what I do is called brain-based hypnotherapy, and brain-based hypnotherapy really goes to, so I like to describe it this way. There are three parts to the brain. And just to keep it simple, we'll call it the top brain, the middle brain, and the bottom brain. The top brain is your conscious brain. That is the brain that went online around your 20s, that really got solidified around your 20s, I should say. And it's the brain that you equate all the meaning, and it's where your language is and all the thinking stuff happens. Underneath that is the middle brain. The middle brain is where all the emotions happen. It's where you store all the memories. And what happens is that middle brain is always playing, kind of like a jukebox or like a stereo that just has a CD on rotation and it never stops playing. Thing is playing the same song, the same music. And it only changes when you take control of it. And I'll come back to that. Now, the bottom brain is all the involuntary stuff, all the human stuff, just, heartbeat, breathing, all of that stuff happens. But also in that is the fight or flight. And so
Okay.
we are triggered in our middle brain, and we're triggered by things that's happening today that look like things that happened a long time ago. So I jokingly talk to my daughter tells my grandson, sit down, sit down, sit down. She says it like 50 times a day. Sit down, sit down, sit down. So I joke to her and I said, when he grows up and gets a girlfriend, his girlfriend is going to say, sit down. And he is going to snap on her. He's going to be like, y'all not sitting down. You sit down. And she's not going to know where the heck that came from. And it's going to be because when he was a kid, he heard his mom say, sit down like 50 times. And he probably did not want to sit down ever. A 4-year-old boy does not want to sit down. And
That's
so
the bottom. This is the bottom brain we're talking about. These are
this is
like
this is
programmed habits that we don't realize we're being programmed into.
The middle brain, yes, exactly. So the program, the bottom brain is all the stuff that was inborn, that
Oh,
just
sorry.
already came part of our program. The middle
Oh,
brain is
sorry.
the stuff that gets downloaded in
Okay.
our program. So the bottom brain, you could think of the bottom brain as all the stuff that you don't have to think about, right? You don't have to tell your food to digest. You don't have to tell your heart to beat. You don't have to tell your lungs to breathe. All of that stuff is just happening for you, thankfully, because if we had to rely on ourselves, we would totally forget to make our hearts beat. So the bottom brain does all of that stuff. The middle brain is where stuff gets downloaded. And so you need to change the program. So what hypnotherapy can do is change that program. The same way you download a new operating system to your phone is the same way hypnotherapy works, really the same way. So whatever happened to you in your past is happened. And then we would talk through the way you want it to look. And then we download that into your brain using hypnotherapy. We open up your subconscious brain, that middle brain that I talked about. We open that up. We let some of those old memories out. And the way we do that is to just shift the memory, shift the meaning you put around the memory. Because most of the time it was off. Our interpretation of it was off. And so we shift the meaning that you give it, and we give it a new story. And that new story sticks because the brain does not know the difference between imagining something and actually doing it or actually happening. And so because the brain doesn't, you can reconsolidate those memories by just going back and shifting what they look like, or giving the meaning to them, a new meaning.
Have there been any clinical trials to show the effectiveness of the stuff?
There have been some, but hypnotherapy, it can't be kind of like existential therapy. It can't really be measured the same because what I experience hypnotherapy is going to be different than how you experience it. I mean, we can hook you up to a heart monitor and a brain scan, and we can do all of those things to see how your brain changes. But the most profound change is in your attitude and your response to things, and it's really difficult to measure that. So what's going to happen is where if you have a brother or sister or a spouse or whatever, a significant other, and they tend to trigger you, what happens after hypnotherapy is that you're not triggered by those things anymore. And so it becomes really difficult to track it because you're not responding in that way. All you know is that it's not happening. Remember, I used to snap out every time somebody told me to sit down. I don't do that anymore. Oh, remember, every
Or
time I went to,
grandson?
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like that will happen. And most of the time, people notice it before you do. People will start to say, you seem calmer. You seem, easy, more easygoing. And then you'll start to notice it after that.
That's a common thing with any type of like mental
Mm-hmm.
health issue. It's hard because you can't measure it,
Yep.
right? You can't measure like somebody's anxiety. They like have to fill out a form or something. And it's
Right.
like, I'm really anxious today.
Yeah.
Versus, okay.
And all of that is relative because my version of pain is different from your version of pain. And you can say the pain is at a 10, and we could literally have the same pain, but we wouldn't know because for me, it feels like a 6. And for you, it feels like a 10 because we have different thresholds for pain. And then you might be able to take more physical pain, and I might be able to take more emotional pain. And that's why you can't measure it because there's no baseline.
So I guess a good way to measure it is if just somebody's feeling better, then you can't
Exactly.
really do. I'm
Right.
performing better at work. I'm more relaxed.
Yep, exactly. Less stress, but all of those things are relative too because you can't show them. So the way that I monitor it is by this is my measure. When a person first comes to me, I ask them what's going well. And a lot of times they don't have an answer for me. They're like, nothing. I'm like, that's not true. Something is going well. And then they wait and they wait and they think and they think. And then I'm like, we'll get at least 3 things down and then we can move on from there. And somewhere in the sessions, when I ask that question, because I ask the question in every single session, eventually they're like, okay, so let me tell you what's going well. And sometimes I don't even have to ask the question. They already are telling me. That lets me know that they're not as heavy, they're not as stressed, and they can see their brain has opened up and they can see other possibilities rather than just the negative ones. So that's one of the ways that I measure progress in my program.
can you tell us, I don't know if you can, how
Yeah.
you put somebody into hypnosis? Is that,
Hypnosis.
are you putting people into hypnosis with hypnotherapy?
Hmm. Yeah. So
Can you give
the a
some of your
couple
secrets?
it really depends on the person. And so I use a lot of intuition in my practice. Some people are more stiff than others. And so the way that you're going to hypnotize them is going to be different. Some people are more literal, other people hear differences more. And so you want to find the words first. So the first thing I do is I ask them to tell me the stories. How did you feel? Like what were you feeling when you were going through this experience? Okay. And how did you want to feel? So I'm getting keywords that I can use while they're in hypnosis. So the first thing is just to talk it out, bring it out, what happened. And from a very logical, formal, like, this is what happened, this is, these were the results, this is how I felt, this is what I would like to have felt, blah blah blah. So we get all of that down, and then what happens is I'm going to count you down into hypnotherapy. So that could be 10, that could be 20, but what I'm doing is allowing your body to relax, because that's where you have to be, is relax. So part of the reason why I have you talk in the beginning is because we have to be able to trust each other. And if we don't have a conversation, your brain is not going to trust me. And the second reason is because I need to know what the immediate need is, because the brain is not going to let me in unless I handle the immediate need. So when I'm originally going in, I'm letting the brain know that we're just handling this stress. And so let's say, for example, the stress is that every time you work a lot, and every single time you come home from work, your wife is like, I need you here earlier. You're not doing anything around the house. And every time she says that, you snap out you go into rage or anger against her. And so it appears that it is her arguing with you about not being home and not taking out garbage and not helping out with the kids. But that's probably not what it is. It's probably deeper than that. But I need your brain to believe that that's what we're going after. So I'm going to ask you questions about how that made you feel. Like, what was that experience like? What would you like to happen when you come home? And then when we go into hypnosis, I'm counting you down, usually starting by either allowing you to relax each part of your body. And I usually do that by having you tense up the body parts separately first, and then release them. And if you tense them up purposely, then when you release them, they release more of the tension that was actually there. And so you go into this relaxed mode. After I get the body into a relaxed mode, I need to get the brain into a relaxed mode as well. And so I'm having you take deep breaths, going down into your diaphragm, and behind your belly, behind your stomach, is a nerve called the vagus nerve. And so you know how when you eat too much and your belly swells, well, you get sleepy? Well, that's because there's a nerve right behind your belly. And when you push back on that nerve, it causes you to relax. And it sends signals to your brain saying, go ahead and relax.
It runs from
Now,
like your belly to your brain, right? It's
yeah.
like
Mhm.
all. Okay,
Exactly.
sorry.
And it's the only nerve that does that. All the other nerves go out, like get messages from the brain, and it sends the messages out. Well, the vagus nerve does both. It gets messages from the brain, but it also sends messages to the brain. And it's right behind your belly. And it really is like that gut, that is your gut
Your gut
right
feeling.
behind. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the second thing that I want you to do. I want you to send calm, optimal brain messages to your brain, and that you do that through your body. And so the body relaxes, you push against the vagus nerve, the brain begins to relax. And then I allow the brain to see that you're safe now. So we go into your subconscious brain. By then, your subconscious brain begins to open. And then I have you think of a symbol, usually something in nature, just whatever comes to mind, for you. And let's say, for instance, you said a bicycle. For some reason, you saw a bike. I'm like, okay, so your idea of calm, peaceful is a bike. And so just see the bike. I want you to look at the bike, see it, sense it, imagine it. What does it look like? And then you'll describe the bike to me. And as you describe the bike to me, you're beginning to trust me more. You're beginning to trust your brain more. You're beginning to go down deeper and deeper and deeper into hypnosis. And then now we know that we can always use this bike to give you like an anchor. So if we go into a place that's uncomfortable, I can bring you back to calm, optimal brain state by saying, now go ahead and imagine your bike. see or sense it, and then you'll imagine the bike. And that's my way of bringing you back and forth in and out of hypnosis. And so once I get your brain to trust me, we're in subconscious brain anyway, then while we're down there, I'm going to have you go back to a memory. Now, your brain will tell us where it's going to go. Now, if your brain goes to age 21, then I know there's a lot of work to be done and your brain is not ready to do it. If your brain, like just the other day, I was seeing somebody and her brain went immediately back to 2 years old. And I'm like, wow, like that doesn't always happen. That meant she was really ready for the healing and very trusting to go all the way back to 2 years old. So she went to the very first memory. And that's what happens when you are arguing with your significant other and they are triggering you. It's because it really leads back to an old memory that's lodged or stuck in your middle brain that you just can't let go of. And then if I go all the way back, let's say it takes me to 2 years old, I clear that because that was the very first time you felt whatever it was you were feeling. Let's say, for instance, you say, well, I feel like she was talking down to me. I feel like she was being condescending by telling me she needed me home and she does not control me. It's like, okay, so you felt controlled. You felt like she was being condescending. So when is the first time you ever felt that? And so let's say the brain just took us back to 5 years old. And you tell me what that is, and then we shift that. We reconsolidate that memory to make it what you wanted it to be. And then we just bring that up to your conscious brain by counting you back in the same way we counted you down. We can count you in, have you bring all of that up to your conscious brain, and the brain won't know the difference between what really happened and what we imagined in hypnotherapy and hypnosis.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the whole process. I know you just asked me about how do you take them down into hypnosis. But the bottom line is it's about relaxing the body, relaxing the brain, and opening up the subconscious
Is the
mind.
person aware of what's going on?
Yeah, it's kind of like, think of it this way. You know how you're falling asleep and right before you fall asleep, you kind of like, you're still awake. You could kind of hear what's happening around you, but you are relaxed. Have you ever felt that as you were falling asleep?
Yeah, you kind of like things are starting to be like blurry almost.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of the same place where you are in your brain, because what you're doing is slowing your brain waves down.
Is there any meanings behind like dreaming or anything that you like somebody says they have a crazy dream? Like I woke up screaming in my sleep the other night.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, it was
It
really
depends.
nice.
It was nice. That's the way you describe it.
Woke up screaming. My fiance was like, wake up. And I was like, oh, but it only happens when I sleep on my back.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And also, let me ask you this: where in the night did it happen? Did it happen in the beginning when you first fall asleep? Did it happen in the middle, or did it happen towards the end of the night, like almost morning?
I probably did happen. I get up at like 5:30. It happened like 3:30.
Okay, so that was towards the end of the night. And so, what?
I didn't want to wake up. Sleep about going to work. Ah!
So really, what it breaks down to?
I remembered what happened in the
You
dream
did?
when I was. There was a car. I don't want to talk about this.
You brought it up.
I know, but I was just like, so I had something written down about asking you about
Okay,
when
so I'll
people
tell
talk to
you
you about
this.
their dreams.
Yes, let's say this. So if it happens at the end of the
I
night,
told you some of this stuff is going to hit too close to home for me.
when the dreams happen towards the end of the night, it's your brain venting. It's venting out, and so that's actually good because it's the brain saying, "Okay, we no longer have to process. We no longer have to hold on to this information. We can let it go now." Now, if it happens continuously, it means that it's deeper. There's something deeper there that the brain just can't let go of, even though it's trying and trying and trying. Most of the traumatic dreams happen in the middle of the night, but those dreams that where you still have a lot of work to do, those usually happen in the middle of the night. If it happens towards the end of the night, I'm usually not as concerned because that's the brain doing its work. That is basically I like to say that dreaming is like the brain's way of going to the bathroom. So that's its way of releasing.
Um, hang on. When it, that stuff, I usually sleep on my side or on my
Mm-hmm.
stomach. But whenever I sleep on my back, it seems like something like that happens.
Yes,
And
and
I've had in the past. I'm sorry, I don't know what this is turning into. I've had like sleep paralysis and I haven't had it in like a while, but that always happened when I slept on my back too.
okay. And so what I hear is that one, you're accessing a different part of your brain, and so you also there might be some effects on your breathing when you're sleeping on your back. And when you're sleeping on your back and your breathing is different, then your brain waves are going to be different. And if the brain is interpreting this as danger, like we can't breathe, we're going to die, we can't survive, we need to do something, it may manifest in a dream to get you to awaken so that you can stay alive, basically.
Jesus, that sounds interesting. Um, it
The
was funny
brain is
though, because
fascinating.
once I woke up, my fiance was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Oh yeah." It's just
Right. But most likely you had a feeling that went along with that dream. You might have forgotten it, or once you woke up, it may have dissipated, but there was something happening. There was an emotion. There was
no,
a
yeah, I
feeling.
remember. I remember what I was screaming in the dream ended up being what I was like screaming
Mm.
here in this world. Okay.
Yeah. And if you can reconcile that, so let's say you wake up, most of the time what I want to know is this: what part is real and what part is fake, right? Because dreams are fantastic sometimes. It's like there was a snake and a cow and a car, right? It's like, oh, so was it the car you actually drive? Yes, it was the car I actually drive. The cow I saw, that it's the cow that's on the picture at this restaurant. It's like, okay, what about the snake? No, I never saw the snake before. Okay. So I want to like separate the parts out that are real and which parts are fantastic. And if you can separate the parts that are real, then you want to know the feeling that you associate with it. Like, say, for instance, you dreamed about getting attacked by a dog, right? Or just a dog even barking at you. And so I want to know, what does a dog represent to you? Oh, dog represents, a threat, don't go there, beware of dog, kind of thing. Okay, so where in your life do you feel like you need to be, something is threatening your life? And when I say threatening your life, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die, as much as it means that your livelihood, your freedom, your way of thinking is being challenged. And to your brain, that does mean death. To the brain, familiar is good, unfamiliar is bad. Survival is about doing what's familiar, not about doing what's new. That's not, to the brain, that is not going to keep you alive. And so where are in your life are you not willing to move forward? Where do you feel like you need to be? Where do you feel like you're being challenged and it's scary? And so that's what I'm looking for. So it may not be about the dog itself. It's normally about what the dog represents, which is, there's an obstacle in the way. I can't get through that gate because there's a dog there.
Have you experimented or spoke to people that had experience with psychedelics?
Yeah, quite a few of my clients do. I'm not for or against them. I don't have an opinion on whether they work or don't work. For certain people, they do certain good things, and for other people, they do things that are not so good. So it really depends on the person. Most of the time, when people come to me who use psychedelics, they are accessing parts of their brain um, that they would like to access, and they want to unpack it. Some people like the experience. Other people are like, never, don't ever want to feel that again. I saw too much, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. You usually don't get anything in the middle. There's nobody who's like, yeah, they're all right. They're okay. They're kind of cool. It's usually, I love them or I hate them. Like, no, that was messed up what happened to me. Or it was like, oh, it was so wild, this thing that happened. Yeah, you rarely get anybody that's in the middle. People are usually one or the other.
Okay. Was specifically the DMT or ayahuasca? I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
heard of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what happens is everybody's experience is going to be different. just like hypnotherapy, just like I said about hypnotherapy. And so, and their body's reaction, because there's a physical and also a mental or emotional response to the drugs. And so you're looking at what the physical response is. For some people, that might be sweats, that might just be like that daze, or just like can't move, feeling just stuck and like they don't have control. And then there's the mental, where some people might hallucinate or hear things, just whatever that happens. But yeah, you have different responses.
Would you so you said you worked with high performing or high achieving males between 40 and 55 predominantly. What would you, so if somebody that was having an existential crisis, or somebody that was struggling to find their way in like their early 20s, mid 20s, something like that, how would you approach that? Would it be a completely different, or you approach everybody similarly and then take it from as the course goes?
Yes and no. So there are parts of my program that I approach everybody the same, and I have a 10-step process called Control the Controllable, and I'm always going to take you to those through those 10 steps in that same way: awareness, acceptance, adjust, like gratitude. Like all of the steps are exactly the same. However, I might spend 2 weeks with you on awareness, right? Because you are so far, you have no insight. And so we may spend more time on awareness, where somebody else, we might get awareness in the first 5 minutes. They're like, let me tell you, I already know what this is about, right? This is coming from when my mom used to lock me in the closet, whatever. So they might already have a lot of insight. And so we don't have to spend a lot of time in awareness. So the framework is the same, but how long we spend on those different frameworks are going to be different. And then the other thing is, like I said before, I'm asking what's going well, what challenges do you have? And so the challenges of a 40 or 55-year-old might be different than the challenges of a 25-year-old. So in that sense, how we approach those challenges are going to be different. But what's always the same is that most likely what you're experiencing right now today has something to do with what happened between 0 and 7 years old. And if it's not 0 to 7, the furthest will be 0 to 14. But most of the time, what I'm dealing with is something that happened between 0 to 7 years old.
So issues that people have at any point in their life later on, past those teenage years, you're saying almost always traces back to when they were between 0 and 7, at the latest 14.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we just start repeating. You meet the
Wow,
same people.
that's crazy. That shows you how much we really depend on our guardians, or whoever, because what do you know when you can't
7.
control anything at that
Exactly.
age? It's so crazy.
Right. And our interpretations are so off. Like we observe really well. If you think about it, you ever seen a 5-year-old and they just study you, and then they'll do exactly what you did, or they'll say exactly what you did. So you remember how 5-year-olds, they go through this stage where they repeat everything you said. You're like, stop doing that. They're like, stop doing that. You're like, okay, all right now. It's like they repeat everything you say. That's them trying to learn. And so when we, between 0 and 7, that's what we do. We observe. We just take a look at everything, and then we apply meaning to it. And then from 7 to 14, we're trying to prove that meaning. We're like, okay, so the last 7 years, I've been looking at this love thing, or this money thing, or this, growing up thing, whatever you're interpreting. And this is what I think about it. Here are my hypotheses. And so from 7 to 14, you're trying to prove those hypotheses. And so you're like, proof. Your brain is only going to let you see the proof. It's not going to let you see times when it didn't prove. And so you're seeing the proof. So from 7 to 14, you start solidifying the ideas. But from 14 to 21, they really become solid. And remember, I also said your conscious brain, your prefrontal cortex becomes solid in that time too, because all before around 24 years old does it become solid. So somewhere around 21 is when you're getting kind of stuck in your ways. You become who you are. Your personality is not going to change much, but really your personality was set in place 0 to 7. If you notice, people are pretty much the same from 0 to 7 as they are at 21. Who they are doesn't change much unless they start to heal the things that got them where they are.
Or if they had like experience, like, because you don't always hear those stories about people that end up drug problem or something, but that could still would that be tied back to?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Most likely, when I worked in a psychiatric hospital, whenever I see addiction, I can always trace it back to trauma. And a lot of times, especially for women, it's sexual trauma. But whenever I see addiction, I know trauma is there. And it's just a matter of getting to it, finding it. But addiction is usually attached to trauma, and trauma shows up in all of us. We all have trauma, but it just affects others differently. Some people more than others.
So you could so your whole life, or how you're going to be your whole life, is shaped in your very formidable years when you have little to no control over who you are anyway.
Exactly. Yep. You said it. And what's so fascinating is I
Thanks,
work
Mom.
a lot.
Thanks, Dad.
Right. That's why when people come to me, they're like, I feel like I'm effing up my kid, right? I feel like I'm messing up my kid. I'm like, you are. It's okay though. Still sit on the
We're all messed up. What are you gonna do?
like, yeah, you are. You have
Go
no
listen to
control.
Tony talks, to see what could really go wrong. Yeah.
So that's the joy, but also the curse of being a parent is that you are going to get it wrong. I tell a story often about this time where my grandfather told me, don't stress your mother out. You're going to give her an ulcer and kill her. Now, he didn't really mean, but in my literal brain, because I'm a very literal person, all I can see is my mom dying because of me. And so I'm devastated. And I become this perfectionist, like this perfect kid, but it becomes really stressful to be a perfect kid. And it does cut off some of your friendships because people wouldn't hang out with me. Sometimes they're like, no, we're not bringing Kine with us.
Maybe that's why the kids that are so proper and so orderly, or so, I don't know. They seemed like most straight arrow were looked at in some way as not being cool or accepted because everybody else was so or to some level scrambled by whatever they had issues with.
Yeah, it's like most kids are free, and then those kids are not so free. They have already interpreted life as that they can cause or effect, right? If I do this, this happens. If I do this, that person yells. If I do this, that person hugs me. So they already can see really clearly where the love is and where the punishment is. And so they become almost robotic or really programmed. They become programmed to perform in the way that is going to get them love.
Is there any effect, or how should I phrase this? When the woman is pregnant, how does she get pregnant? No, when the woman is pregnant, is there any environmental factors that could affect somebody's behavior while somebody's still a fetus?
Yes, every single thing. My daughter is pregnant right now with her second. And I tell her all the time, they already know the name for the baby. So I always say, whenever she gets like her blood pressure up, I'm like, Jada. I just say Jada because that's the baby's name. And so she knows that means to bring it down. And I'm a therapist all the time, all the freaking time. So if you're my friend, you'll get so tired of me because I speak in therapist's voice most of my life. And so my daughter gets upset and she's on 10 and I'm like, Jada, darling, Jada. And then she's like, okay, Mom, okay.
You're probably an equal great friend as you are kind of annoying friend.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
Yes. So every single thing you do affects the baby. And that's why sometimes when people, they can't even access the thing that happened, we can still heal it though. Insight is not required for healing. So where I say we're going to take the brain back to the first time that thing happened, yes, we are. But at the same time, if we don't get there, if brain never gets there, that's okay too. Because I'm going to ask the brain to delete anything that is an association with, anything that looks familiar to, anything across all time, dimension, space, and reality. So even if this happened when the sperm hit the egg, then all the way back then we are healing everything associated with this anxiety or everything associated with this anger, whatever the emotion is that we're healing. But every single thing that happens to you, especially between 0 and 7, is going to shape how you respond to things in your later years.
And you've seen results in treating people that had like levels of depression from those ages, or like panic attacks as a result of stuff that happened at those ages?
Yeah, if they wait so long that they have depression, hypnotherapy is harder to use, but you can use it if they're ready. It has to be a person who is absolutely ready, because if they're not ready, then they're going to resist the hypnosis. But like sometimes I get people who have gotten so depressed that they're ready to commit suicide, and I've seen so many people come back from that place of wanting to commit suicide to a joyful life. And it's amazing to watch and to see people shift from not wanting to be here to having and enjoying life. But that's the reward. I mean, the money is good, but the reward is really in seeing that person that different, or the people that love them saying, oh my God, like I cannot believe how calm and peaceful and loving this man is, or this, child is.
So I wanted to ask you, and this actually got brought up when I messaged you.
Mhm.
You said we're looking into how you can use hypnotherapy to, I don't know, I don't remember the word you said, but let's just say cure racism
Heal. Hmm.
or
Yeah.
heal. Maybe you said heal.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's the word I'll use a lot. This is my buzzword. So that's the work that I'm doing now. I am collecting. So I want a group of 20 white males and a group of 20 Black males. And I'm going to talk to them separately about their emotions and how this affected them. And then I'm taking them into group hypnotherapy to heal the effects, because every single thing we just talked about still has to do with the is still the core, right? So racism is taught, it's programmed. You're not born racist. And the only way you are born racist is because of what we said. It starts when the sperm hits the egg. So if your parents are racist and they teach you that, and they're talking about that while you're in the stomach, then you come out and then you hear more about it. You don't know even why. You don't even know what a Black person is yet. But the moment you see them, you know that you're not supposed to like them because of what your family has taught you. But if nobody ever says anything to a kid is just going to play with whoever. They do not care. They have no judgment. And so kids don't judge. That is not, they don't even have that part of their brain hasn't even been developed yet, because the judgmental part of our brains comes from reactions, and that they haven't had enough action yet to react yet. And so the child is not going to judge. And so if we could take that person back to before the racism was imprinted in them,
Oh,
programmed.
okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Hmm.
I was having an aha moment.
Yes. Exactly. And that's what my work is right now, is how do we get you back to that beginner human, I call it. It's like when you first hit the ground and you're like, bam, I'm here, world. You were sweet and innocent and kind and loving. And we want to get you back there, because that's the true you. That's the real version of you, not this version where you are taught how to be and who to be and what to do and what not to do, because you can be that person all over again. And as long as you are willing to let go of that program to really truly find yourself. And that is what we all are looking for, but especially that man that we talked about before, that 40 to 55-year-old man that will be experiencing a midlife crisis. That is what he's looking for. He's looking to get back to his true authentic self, but it happened so freaking long ago that he doesn't know how to get there. And so he may need some assistance from somebody like me.
You said you want, so part of what you want to do to cure this or heal this is have 20 white men, 20 black men, and you're going to put them into hypnosis.
Yeah, putting them in hypnosis, bringing
And,
them back to who they were
and
before the anger.
so they're gonna be people that they're gonna be people that you have pre-identified as having some type of racism.
They could. What I am asking for is people who are affected by racism. So maybe you are a racist yourself. Maybe your father was a racist and you are not. Right? But you're still affected by it. You still have a feeling about that. You still have residual effects of that. I have patients who think differently than their parents do. Their parents might have tried to raise them as racist and it just didn't happen for them. They would not let it. And so and that's because also growing up, you will make interpretations of that. So they might interpret that as being bad. Like, why is my mom treating that lady like that? That is so sad. Right? You have this feeling. If you got sad watching your parent belittle or beat somebody or brutalize someone, then you're not likely to grow up that way. But if you did not get that response, if your response was, well, that's my mom, if she says it's right, gotta just follow mom, then you might grow up and be a racist. But it was taught to you, so it can be untaught, or you can get a new program. Just like when you download a new program into your phone, you don't go back to the old program, even if the old program was better. Unfortunately, it's like, dang it, I like the old program better.
Like a Facebook update, and everybody freaks out. Now I'm not using Facebook anymore, and then you get over
exactly. Yeah. So it's like that. You download a new system into your brain, but this time it's the system that you choose, not the one that was just given to you. Because that's what happens in life. We're just given this life. We don't have a lot of control over it. We're just given it, and then we have to take control when we get older. Now that we understand what happened.
Yeah, you are who. This is the thing that's I try to simplify it down to. You just popped out of your mother, and that's who you are. Now, people, just because you're that way, just because you popped out from certain people, how could you think have some type of superiority or some type of gift over them? And
right,
if people are born of circumstances, why can't you just be understanding of people's circumstances?
well, two reasons. One is,
oh, you actually have an answer for this. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, because one is, okay, let me explain it to you this way. It's silly, but this is the way. A bird has no idea of air, right? A fish has no idea of water because it's in water so much. Like, that is its atmosphere, that is its surrounding. So it doesn't know any different. And so it's like, what? What? Wet? What? I'm not wet.
Right.
Yeah, you are.
It just
You're in water.
is.
Yeah, it just is. And so for somebody who's had white privilege, or if they've experienced that there's this disparity between races, they may not see it because life is just, for them, it's just air.
It's a
and
bubble.
They don't.
Everybody's living in their own bubble.
Right, exactly. And so because of that tainted view, and for some people it's rose colored. I talked to a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he said that it was no racism where he lived. And he lives in the South. So let's just go with that's not true. I sat with a lady who in California, and she told me, have you ever experienced racism? She asked me, and I said, yeah, of course. She's like, you have? And she was surprised. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I don't know if I've ever seen racism. This was a 70-year-old woman in her area. And I was like, well, part of the reason why you haven't seen racism in your
What's
area.
the demographics?
Exactly.
Right.
Because it's not very many people who look like me in your area. So of course you're not going to see racism. If you grew up here, or she moved there when she was like a teenager or something, and then she stayed there, and then she raised her kids there, and now her kids have kids. And so no, of course she hasn't seen racism much because she stayed in the same place. And when she travels, she probably goes to places that are also very similar demographic, right? And so she's not going to see it. But if she would have taken me somewhere with her, and she could see how people treat me slightly different than they treat her, then she would begin to see that. And it took time. Like some of my friends, they don't see it either. Like, for example, a friend of mine, she was telling me a story that she went to China, and while she was there, the taxi cab driver tried to bamboozle her on the rate. So she knew it was supposed to cost $10 to go where she needed to go. He told her 100. And so she was like, I'm not giving you
That's
$100.
a classic tourist.
Yeah, exactly. But she travels so much because she works internationally. This is her job. So she wasn't a tourist. And so her bags were in his trunk, and she's in the back seat and he's in the front. And he says, look, you have to pay me $100. I have your luggage. And she said, oh, okay. Well, just so happens there were police officers just down at the corner. She rolls down the window and she goes, help, help, he's kidnapping me. He's kidnapping me. Help, help. And she yells this out, right? And I had to tell her, I was like, oh my gosh, like that is white privilege. Only a white girl can do that. And she was like, no, Kine, you can do that too. Like if you felt unsafe, you could just yell out. I was like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am, that is not the truth. Let me tell you, it's a 50-50 chance. It might work, but it might not work. I might be the one ended up getting handcuffed and taken off.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, you said it would work for the white woman, and you said it might work for you, but you can't be sure.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And that's the privilege. The privilege that you get.
That's a easy. Like that's a good way to explain it. I kind of like, you can kind of understand that.
Yeah. And I think that's what people are not understanding, that I'm not saying that white privilege is bad. Hey, take advantage of, yell out and scream, he's kidnapping me, if that's the way you're going to save your $90. Because that man was not going to.
Yeah, I mean.
Exactly. Use it. But I'm just saying, like you said earlier, just recognize that I don't have that. I don't have the option, that I might have to pay the $100.
Yeah, even if it's on like even if things are on like a spectrum, or it's like a percentage chance, yours could be all the way over.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I never heard it explained like that, because you try to wrap your head around these concepts, and it's like, what the
yeah. Yep, exactly. And I think also when you are white privileged and you also have money, it makes it very difficult to understand. When you have some white privilege and you don't have any money, you have maybe some sense of it, because you're like, well, still, it's hard for me too, because I'm broke, I'm poor or whatever. But imagine if it's that hard for you, then it's even harder for a person of color.
Do you have any? Have you ever heard of somebody describing race as a social construct?
I hear people describe it that way, but is there a specific question? I don't even know where to go.
No, it's something. It's no. I'm not. I'm just. I spoke to somebody recently. We discussed that, because I think part of the dialogue that needs to happen is education in general,
mm-hmm.
and then. I said this on the episode a few weeks ago, that it's absurd to judge people differently just based on their color or whatever, if they look different. I mean, it's tribal in nature, because when people evolved, they moved to different climates and their skin looked differently, or the skin evolved differently, or whatever, the genes. So it's just a scientific explanation to why people, like white people, because they moved to colder climates, they needed to get vitamin D easier or something like.
Right. So that's like the fundamentals of it. But what happens is remember we talked about greed, lust, and anger. The greed comes out because slavery was this was about economics. This was about money. Slavery was not about you're better, I'm worse, as much as it was like you are bigger and stronger. It'll be easier for you to lift things that I can't lift. You don't understand. I can lock you up, like, because I can have this power over you, I'm going to take it. And then I'm going to exercise it to the fullest degree so that now you can't leave me, because that's how I need you to be. I need you to be so scared to leave me that you never threaten my money. Because if I decide to leave as a slave person, then I'm threatening the livelihood of this man who owns me. And so he has to make it so I never want to leave. That is his way of ensuring that he always has the money to coming in. So slavery was about economics. It
Right,
was
right.
about them making money. And then it became this like hate thing where they began to hate Black people because of how harshly they treated them. They created this program. And so you have to hate somebody. If you're going to treat somebody that poorly, you got to program yourself to believe bad things about them. They're dangerous, they're dirty, whatever you need to believe. You have to program yourself to do that in order for you to continue to be that evil. So the more they do it, the more they need to keep that money, the more it's this cycle of becoming more and more and more hateful, more evil, more brutal. They had to do that in order to stay and keep their money intact. And so
To keep the power.
Exactly. And once that became threatened, the only way that they could keep it was to get even more powerful or more. So now we'll kill you. If you leave, we will kill you. And I'm going to do it in front of the other slaves so that they will not even think about doing it, because I'm going to show them this is what happens when you go up against me. And so now they're not going to do that. And then talk about the science. So then you do that in front of the woman, and now the woman can't even respect her man because her man just got brutalized by some other man. And so now she sees the other man as her savior, not her own man anymore. And that's how you separate the Black family.
You kind of like reprogram the brain.
Exactly.
Because that's not the masculine. You kind of like fucking weird.
Yeah. And he can't protect me. So I now have to bow down to this man to stay alive, because I know that man can't stay alive. And some of it I'm doing to keep him alive. I'm trying to get the attention off of him, and I'm getting the attention so that I go and I try to get him to pay the oppressor to pay attention to me, just so my man doesn't get abused.
It's like
anymore.
a survival.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I want to talk about something positive.
Okay, let's see how we can do that.
Tell us about your boot camp.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So it's two things. So originally when I started the boot camp, Presidential Lifestyle is a wellness company focused on wealth in all of its forms. So when I first started the boot camp, it was all about maximizing your wealth, your wellness, and what we call your wow, which is like your love, your adventure in your life. And because of COVID, what I noticed is that a lot of people were so worried about catching the coronavirus, but they weren't doing anything. And so I'm like, well, what if you paid attention to your health and just built up your immune system? Because I can tell you, I've not gotten a flu or a cold in like 30 years. And the way that I do that is to build up my immune system. I'm not wearing gloves. I'm not wearing a mask, because my immune system is what's going to keep me protected. So I started talking about this, and people were like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. But as I was talking about that, the other challenge that came up, the real problem was that, okay, so that's cool. I can focus on my health. But wait a minute, my wealth is also in jeopardy, because this is a healthcare crisis, but this is also a wealth crisis. So the shift became, well, how do I add a virtual layer to my business so that I can run a business like you? Because for the last 2 years, I've had a virtual business. So that's why I said in some ways, this pandemic hit us hard, but in some ways it didn't, because we already had a virtual business. So all we had to do was turn up. You just like turn up the volume on what we were doing and get louder. And we already had a subscription-based model. And that subscription-based model kept us alive, because we didn't have to do face-to-face, first of all, and then we didn't have to do one session at a time trying to get our money.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, you could do it over video and stuff. Mm-hmm. You could you could do hypnotherapy over video.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. We do. I do most of I would say 80% of the people I see now, and since COVID, 100% of the people I see now are video. Before it was about 80%, and I did speaking engagements, so I would tend to see people live, and then they would want to work with me from there. That's typically how I get clients, is because I'll do speaking engagements, and then people want to work with me. But
with same or similar results.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Because it really, all the brain is doing is listening. I'm not touching you. And most of the time in hypnotherapy, every once in a while, if somebody's just really uptight and we're in person, I may put my hand on their shoulder to help them relax. Sometimes just wiping your brow helps you relax. It's almost like it makes you feel childlike. And so every once in a while, I'll do that if somebody's really uptight, or if they've had a trauma and they brought up that memory and I need them to go back down and relax. I might touch them, but for the most part, I'm not touching them anyway. So being on camera is easy to do it this way, because really all they need to do is hear my voice.
Okay. Yeah, so all the sensations come from audio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And through the audio, I am tapping into your brain and asking your brain to do some things. So some of it is audio, and then some of it is visualization or sensing. Like if I asked you to think of if I asked you to think of an apple, you could think of an apple. And for those people
Orange. No,
or orange.
Sorry.
So maybe I should just ask you to think of fruit and see what comes up, right?
Oh, you beat me.
And so because we already have a way to visualize, I'm always going to use that visualization technique in order to get your brain to know where we're going. And for some people, every once in a while, somebody cannot visualize, like they cannot see an apple if I ask them to. If I say, look at your hand, now close your eyes, now imagine your hand. There are a few people in the world, 25% of the world, that cannot do that. But 75% of the world can do that. So if you are a person that cannot do that, then hypnotherapy is going to be a little tougher. I still have ways to do it without the visualization, but the visualization makes it happen faster.
So if people want to get in touch with you,
yes,
follow you, or
so I usually like to break it down like this. If you like to connect with me on the free version, then Instagram is where I hang out. So it's Kine Corder, Kinecorder, Kine Corder on Instagram. And there, I don't do a lot of lesson stuff there. I just really, it's my lifestyle. You're going to see, recipes of cooking. You're going to hear about wealth, wellness, and a lot of adventure and lifestyle stuff. And then also my podcast. So I have a podcast called Presidential Experience, where we chronicle man's search for meaning over money. And that we are on hiatus until, I don't know when this is airing, but July. So we come back in July. But those are the two free ways to hang out with me. There's a low cost way. One is you can take the controllable, guide yourself without me, kind of like a course. We call it a guide. And that would be for $47. You would go to joinpresidentialexperience.com. And on that page is an offer to have a one-on-one conversation with me. But as you scroll down to the bottom of that page, if you're like, I'm not ready to meet Kine, because that is a little bit more, that costs $197 to have a one-on-one conversation with me. So you may say, I'm not ready to meet Kine yet, but I still want to interact with her a little bit more. And so you can take the controllable guide. Now, if you work with me, I will walk you through it. But if you just want to take it yourself, you can do that.
It's an option for everybody.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Great.
And really what it is levels of comfort. Some people just want to search around, they just want the free stuff and they want to see if they like me. They're like, I do like this lady and I want to hear more of what she has to say. Where others, all they need is this one podcast and they're like, oh my gosh, I love her and I need to be wherever she is. I want to follow everything she does. So it just depends on their level of comfort.
Listen, this was great.
Good.
It was too personal sometimes, I felt. but
I can't help it. I'm sorry.
listen. It was I thought it was great, and I appreciate you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And this was good. I like how open you are and receptive and just ready to converse, because not everybody can have conversations about things that they don't know well, but you did a good job of like unpacking what it is and really getting to know it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, every conversation I have is about stuff I don't know well, because I don't know a lot of anything well.